What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and we are back with another datasheet deep dive. This is going to be one of our first dives into the new 10th edition Detachment-Synergies Codex, and what we're going to be talking about today are the Seraphim. These are the jump pack equipped range sisters who focus on pistol weapons as the main part of their armament. And as always with these datasheet deep dives, what I'm going to be doing is discussing the details of their datasheet, their profiles, attachment synergies, as well as any synergies to detachments you can play with them, exactly how much damage you can crank out of this insane unit, alongside ways that you can deal with the Seraphim yourself. So with that, let's dive in and talk about this unit. Now, like most Detachment-Synergies infantry, the Seraphim squad occupy a space that's somewhere around a light infantry unit. Like other jump pack equipped sisters, they have a 5+ invulnerable save and a 3+ armor save, which makes them relatively resilient, but at only toughness 3, they are going to be making those saves quite often. So while they're not the most difficult unit in the game to kill, boasting a 3+ save with potential of cover and getting an invulnerable save when they're out in the open does mean that you have to contribute some meaningful attacks to actually get rid of them. However, once strong anti-infantry shooting gets applied to them, they will disappear fairly quickly. They do only have 1 wound and a 7+ leadership. In addition, they only have an objective control value of 1, and that is important because of the speed of this unit. While they only contribute 1 OC to objective, they have incredible speed that allows them to access objectives that other slower sisters units wouldn't be able to. So if you can use ranged firepower to whittle down defenders on an objective, the Seraphim are so incredibly fast that even that 5 OC from a minimum sized unit will be able to flip objectives and make the Seraphim one of the best utility units in the game, both at taking objectives and completing secondaries. As I've been talking about on the channel for the last couple of days, we are about to move into the Pariah Nexus season, which has fundamentally changed how a lot of missions function. One of the most important changes being that actions can only be performed by units who have not advanced that turn. That is important because it means that high base movement characteristics are incredibly valuable. It allows these units to move 12 inches just by moving normally without advancing or using any other special abilities, and then declare actions on far objectives. And that is incredibly impactful when we're talking about these small, cheap utility units. And it really reinforces the power of Seraphim when it comes to acting as a unit that can be used for scoring. Now, part of the speed of the Seraphim squad is their special ability, Angelic Ascent. This allows them to, after they shoot, if they're not in engagement range, and they do have pistol weapons, so they are able to shoot while engaged, they can then move 6 inches. This is a normal move, so it is subject to all of the normal move restrictions. It can't move into enemy engagement range, although the unit does have the fly keyword, so they are able to move over enemy models as long as they can clear their engagement range, and it does have the downside that they are not then eligible to charge. But this is why the Seraphim squad is so fast. They can move 12 inches, you could potentially advance and shoot them if you have a way to give them assault, and there is one of those in the Codex, as we'll discuss momentarily, then fire their weapons and move an additional 6 inches in order to go potentially up to 24 inches, 18 inches if you don't have the assault keyword, and take objectives or move into table areas in order to score. That already is good enough. For a small, easy to maneuver utility unit, these can act as very aggressive screens, they can movement block enemies, and they can move into positions to do actions or to score engage in all fronts or other similar secondaries excellently. On top of that, they also have the Deep Strike ability, and Angelic Ascent can be used after Deep Strike is resolved, so you can Deep Strike them down 9 inches away from enemies, shoot with them, and then move, meaning that if your opponent has not screened out their objective correctly, it is possible for you to contest objectives with them if they've only screened out one side of the objective, for example. Now, that all makes Seraphim excellent as a scoring unit, but they are also pretty offensively oriented. Each model in the unit comes stock with 2 pistol weapons. Now, these start as bolt pistols, but for every 5 models in the unit, up to 2 of them can replace those bolt pistols with either Inferno pistols, which is a D3 damage 6-inch range Melta weapon with Melta 2, so it goes up to a potential 5 damage if you are within 3 inches of your target. Now, that's calculated before you trigger Angelic Ascent, so it is a little difficult to get into that range, but there are ways to make them significantly faster. here. And we should mention as well that these do have Acts of Faith, the Adeptus-Sororitas army ability, so any random damage high impact weapon like these Inferno pistols is going to be that much more reliable because you can sub in automatic dice results for the results of those Inferno pistol shots. You can automatically wound, automatically deal maximum damage when you need to, which can, in some instances, make the Seraphim squad good at punching through heavier vehicles. Now, the other option for those two special weapon sisters in the unit are Ministorum Handflamers. These are D6 torrent weapons that ignore cover and come in at a base strength of 4. And importantly, each model is equipped with 2 of these. So each special weapon model in the Seraphim squad is firing up to 2d6 strength 4 auto-hitting, ignoring cover attacks, which is fairly reasonable. Their superior can also take a plasma pistol. She can also take a melee weapon if you think you're going to get into melee with a unit, but equipping that plasma pistol is a strict upgrade to her bolt pistol, even if you don't overcharge it, so you're almost always going to do that essentially every time. So she ends up with, at the very least, 1 bolt pistol shot and 1 plasma pistol shot. The unit can be taken in units of up to 10. You can have up to 9 Seraphim plus the Seraphim Superior, and if you do so, you then get 4 Special Weapon Sisters, giving you a total loadout of 5 basic Seraphim equipped with bolt pistols, alongside 4 special weapon models that either each have 2 Inferno pistols or 2 Hand Flamers, plus you have the option of a bolt pistol and a plasma pistol on that Superior, which gives the unit some pretty reasonable shooting if you need to, and having 10 models in that unit actually starts to make them very good at taking objectives. They can then put OC 10 on an objective if they can get close enough to get all 10 models onto it, and at that point they start beating out dedicated high OC utility units at actually taking those objectives. Now, having up to 8 specialist pistols in the unit is already pretty strong, and there are some combos in this codex that make them do absolutely ludicrous damage. But before we get into that, let's talk about some units that can attach into the Seraphim. Now, the big one is the named character Saint Celestine. She brings not only her own very aggressive profile, with both a strong torrent weapon as well as some pretty solid melee, she also dramatically increases the resilience of the unit. Interestingly, Celestine and other conjoined leader units with a single character and then multiple non-character infantry attached into them, interact with their bodyguard unit in a really weird way. While the Celestine and Gemini Superior are together a unit that is attached into the Seraphim squad, the Gemini Superior, not being characters, are still eligible to have wounds assigned to them. So they're able to take damage for the squad that they're attached to. And with a 2+ armor save, 4+ invulnerable save, and multiple wounds, those Gemini Superior are not going anywhere super fast. On top of that, you can also regenerate the Gemini Superior back into the unit if they have been killed. So Saint Celestine allows you to take additional ablative damage on her bodyguards, and therefore save your special weapon sisters that you would want to be getting damage out of. It is, to begin with, difficult to get access to those special weapon sisters, since you're already probably taking saves on the bolt pistol equipped sisters and potentially the sister superior first anyway, and those can all be protected by miracle dice as well, and Saint Celestine just compounds that issue. That said, Celestine is more of a melee-oriented threat. She very much enjoys getting stuck in with her opponent and just mucking with their game plan by doing automatic devastating damage using miracle dice, or just engaging all of their ranged attackers and then respawning when she's killed. So while she is an interesting inclusion in the unit, she doesn't have as much synergy as she would with a unit like Zephyrim, which are already a very aggressively oriented unit type. Now, the other option here is the Jump Pack Canoness. This is a brand new datasheet in the 10th edition Codex and gives you a Canoness profile that is able to attach into Seraphim or Zephyrim squads. Interestingly, the Canoness is able to bring another gun to the unit, since she can be equipped with a hand flamer and a power weapon. The power weapon is a significantly less impressive melee attack profile than her other weapons. Specifically, the Blessed Halberd gives her 5 2-damage melee attacks, and the power weapon only comes in with 4 at strength 4. But with some of the combos that we're going to be talking about later in this video, having an additional hand flamer available to bring your total hand flamer count up to 9 is incredibly strong. On top of that, she also has Sacred Command, which is a Rites of Battle style effect. In the Pariah Nexus update, these were updated to now just discount the cost of a stratagem by 1, so the text is a little bit misleading on the original datasheet. You can no longer duplicate stratagems, which is unfortunate, especially for some of the combos that I'm going to discuss later on in this video, but especially since you're attaching this character to a large unit of Seraphim, you are probably going to be using both offense and defensive stratagems on them pretty regularly. It is a nice quality of life inclusion. And she's also pretty good in melee, almost regardless of the weapon that you give her thanks to her Divine Deliverance, which allows her to once per game dramatically increase her melee output. While most of the time we're going to be trying to shoot and scoot and be very maneuverable with Seraphim squads, the Canoness Jump Pack not only gives you additional ranged power, free stratagems to combo that power off of, and hits a little hard in melee if you really need to. Now last but certainly not least is not actually an attachment for the unit, but something that is going to synergize ludicrously well with the Seraphim squad, and to be perfectly honest, synergize well with basically everything in the Codex, and that is the Triumph of St. Catherine. This is the big funereal procession of sisters that is able to project multiple force multiplication auras around itself. While it can't attach into Jump Pack infantry, it's only able to attach into Battle Sister squads. Most of the time you don't really need to, since it comes in at a ridiculous 18 wounds with a 4+ invulnerable save, so your opponent probably isn't really going to attack it anyway. The big benefits that the Triumph of St. Catherine bring you here are its Relics of the Matriarch's abilities. It can choose 2 auras to apply to itself at the start of each battle round, many of which are very important in the context of the Seraphim squad. The first one is the Fiery Heart. This gives you +2 to your movement characteristic and +1 to advance and charge rolls, bringing the Seraphim up to a basic movement of 14 inches. On top of that, you can also use the Simulacrum of the Argent Shroud. This gives you reroll wounds of 1 with your ranged attacks. Now, if you're equipping Torrent weapons, you don't actually have to worry about a hit roll, so getting any sort of wound roll rerolls is going to be very effective since you are guaranteed to be progressing to the wound step with all of your attacks. She can also grant you an additional Act of Faith with the Simulacrum of the Ebon Chalice, and with the Icon of the Valorous Heart, give you a 6+ Feel No Pain. On top of that, the Triumph also smooths over your Miracle Dice economy by granting you a single automatic 6 on your Miracle Dice pool at the beginning of each battle round. This can combo pretty well with the Simulacrum of the Ebon Chalice to give you additional Acts of Faith, and if you're using things like massed Inferno pistols, you can actually get multiple automatic wound rolls or max damage rolls out of this combo. If you're granting the Seraphim unit Assault, you can also use that automatic 6 alongside the Fiery Heart to sub in a 6 for an advance roll, increasing the Seraphim's movement speed by 9 up to a grand total of 21 inches. Since you're granting +2 movement up to 14 and granting +1 to that advance roll, bringing it to a 7 for the total of 21. Now with all that in mind, exactly what detachments are we going to use these in? Now the first one is probably the least exciting. The Hallowed Martyrs detachment is the detachment right out of the Sisters Index. This one doesn't have too many synergies with Seraphim specifically. You can get +1 to hit if you have lost any models, which can be useful, especially if you have only Inferno Pistol equipped Sisters left. They start to hit on 2s and wound everything on 3s or 4s, which is very effective when punching damage into vehicles, but the Hand Flamer equipped version will probably be more common, and +1 to hit on those doesn't really matter so much. You can potentially be getting +1 to wound, but most of the time I think the Seraphim unit is going to be dead anyway, so that's not the biggest of deals. You can use Praise the Fallen for a reactive attack after you lose any models to an incoming attack. So if you have a larger unit of Sisters, you can potentially play them very aggressively, screen out your opponent, and if they make the mistake of shooting you and kill any of your bolt pistol equipped Sisters, you can turn around and fire those 8 or 9 Hand Flamers directly into their face, and if that unit is light infantry, potentially kill it on the swing back, which is a nice synergy to have, especially alongside Overwatch if you're playing that unit very aggressively. Army of Faith has very specific synergies with Jump Pack units. First of all, it grants additional Acts of Faith as base, which is very nice for, again, Inferno pistol equipped models. On top of that, Angelic Descent also gives you an uppy downy effect. You can redeploy the unit at the end of your opponent's fight phase and then come back down, shoot, and then use Angelic Ascent to move 6 inches again, making the Seraphim squads ridiculously maneuverable and even better at scoring. And you can get +1 AP from Divine Guidance, which synergizes pretty well with basically all of their weapon options. Hand Flamers with +1 AP and Ignore Cover basically put any enemy on their base save, and Inferno Pistols with +1 AP will punch through cover even on a 3+ save enemy. While that can be counteracted by AP reduction effects, you can use Light of the Emperor to ignore characteristic modifiers, and because they are a Jump Pack unit, you can also extend that as a 3-inch aura from the Seraphim squad, which you can then reposition using Angelic Ascent to get that 3-inch range on new units who can then attack and make use of it. You can do the same thing with Blinding Radiance, which can subtract from the hit rolls of enemy attacks when targeting either the Seraphim or units within 3 inches of them, which is a nice bonus to have. Now, all that is great, but what I'm really here to talk about is the Bringers of Flame detachment. detachment. This is the Firestorm Strike Force style of detachment. In fact, it basically just lifted their detachment rule verbatim from the Space Marine Codex. It gives all ranged weapons in your army assault, and if you're within 12 inches of your target, +1 strength, which is great because Seraphim can't equip any ranged attacks that have a greater than 12-inch range, so we're doing fine already. Those are obviously amazing benefits for the Seraphim, and especially since you can use Angelic Ascent to move 6 inches even after advancing, that's how you get the ludicrous movement characteristic out of this unit. You could potentially be advancing up to 6 inches, plus your base movement of 12, an additional 3 from the Triumph of St. Catherine, and then firing and moving 6 inches again for a total movement characteristic of 27 inches, allowing you to get basically anywhere on the table that you really want to. This also dramatically increases their threat range from a relatively piddly 24 inches up to the dizzying heights of somewhere around 33 inches. We're now talking about the threat range of actually strong long-range shooting on a unit equipped entirely with tiny pistols. Now, this can also combo with the Fire and Fury enhancement. This improves the attack characteristic of torrent weapons equipped by models in the bearer's attached unit by 1. It also gives your other ranged weapons in the unit sustained hits 1, which is a nice bonus to have. But realistically, you can attach this on a Canoness who is then attaching into the unit. And if you're a unit of 10 with 4 double hand flamer equipped models, bringing 8 total hand flamers, plus the Canoness's hand flamer herself, you're adding a total of 9 additional torrent weapon shots to that unit every time it fires. Now, this combos even further with the Cleansing Flames stratagem, which grants your torrent weapons devastating wounds. This is only a 1 CP stratagem, although given the limited access to rerolls that Sisters Flamers tend to have, it does make a little bit more sense to make this one cheaper than the Space Marine equivalent in Firestorm Assault Force. So let's talk about exactly how much damage this little jump pack unit can deal. When we have the entire combo assembled, we have a Flamer equipped Canoness with Fire and Fury enhanced on her, attached into a unit of 10 Seraphim with 8 hand flamers. They're standing next to the Triumph, which is fairly easy since you're less worried about getting shots with your bolter equipped model, so you can string the unit fairly far back from where the flamers are in order to get within that 6-inch aura that the Triumph is projecting. That's to grant you reroll 1s to wound for your torrent weapons, and will either then increase your movement speed so you can get in range even faster, or potentially even give you additional acts of faith. Then when they attack, you're going to use Cleansing Flames to grant all those torrents devastating wounds, and firing 9d6 plus 9 flamer attacks thanks to Fire and Fury, on average attacking 40.5 times. Without any help, that's an average of 6.75 devastating damage, with an additional 7 or so dice rerolled thanks to the reroll 1s from the Triumph, giving you somewhere around 8 devastating wounds. If you want to get super spicy, you can actually pull dice out of either the rerolls or your initial roll if you have enough 6s, for up to 2 more if you are using the multiple acts of faith from the Triumph. It's important here to remember that you can't miracle dice the number of attacks you make, so you can simply guarantee that those attacks are going to be devastating for maybe 1 or 2 additional wounds, although that is a kind of low impact place to use 6s in your miracle pool. So that means you're averaging 8 devastating damage if you're just wounding on 6s. If you're wounding on 5s instead, and remember, these are strength 5 flamers at this point, so against anything toughness 9 or lower, you are wounding on 5s, you're also forcing an additional 7 or 8 saves as base. That gets even more insane against lower toughness values, light or medium infantry. Since these things are strength 5, they wound basically any not heavy Terminator armor equipped infantry on 3s, meaning you're averaging somewhere around 30 saves on a target unit without even counting the Cleansing Fire devastating damage or the other pistols in the unit. You can't forget, you're also getting a sustained hits plasma pistol shot that you could overcharge, plus some number of bolt pistol shots as well. The unit can then move with Angelic Ascent to protect itself, position to grant its flamers great overwatch, or even move aggressively to take enemy objectives. So that is pretty impressive damage from what is otherwise a fairly light utility unit. So how exactly do we counter Seraphim? Now, the first thing is fairly obvious. Shoot them with indirect fire weapons. Now, Seraphim do have deep strike, so that's not as great if they are deep striking normally, but at least deep striking is screenable. And with only a 12-inch range, and without the ability to move after deep striking before they shoot, you can fairly easily make it so that the Seraphim can't attack your important targets. So at the very least, having good indirect fire will force them into reserve in a position where they can't alpha strike whatever they want to. You can can also use Overwatch to threaten them. Again, they are only T3 infantry, and while their saves are fairly good, if you have turret weapons of your own, for example, you can be forcing enough saves on them that they'll die before being able to enact their combo. Although before using Overwatch, it's important that you have the ability to kill more than just the bolter pistol equipped sisters in the unit, since they don't really care about those models in terms of the majority of their damage output. So overwatching to just kill their chaff is basically a waste of your command points. Now, screening in general is going to be good, especially if the Seraphim are the majority of the sisters' anti-infantry shooting. If you're forcing them to commit these big 10 model units into your lighter units, that's mostly a trade up for you. And if you have varied threats, you can actually mess with the priority with which they use their angelic ascent. For example, they want to set up in situations where they can shoot and then move out of line of sight. However, if you have strong melee of your own that can reach them in those defensive positions, they oftentimes will want to be leaving their flamers exposed in order to overwatch you. However, if you have good shooting of your own, and they do leave those flamers out in the open, you can then shoot the unit down. So being able to represent threats that both sweep infantry and punish them for taking an aggressive position is going to be important. Now, in terms of profiles that deal with them easily, you want relatively high AP anti-infantry. Anything from strength 4 up is going to be good. And if you can get to AP1 or AP2, or even just AP1 ignoring cover, that's going to do enough work to clear most of the unit. The tough part is going to be getting to hit them before they hit you, however, since they have so much speed that they can spend most of the game hanging out in the back of the table, outside of range of your ranged attacks, before pouncing on whatever they think they can kill in one shot and trying to run away. That's where having threats like indirect fire and even being able to strategic reserve into awkward places on the table for the sisters to deal with, so that you can potentially get shots in the unit before they're able to commit. And with that, that's all I have to say about the Seraphim squad. Let me know down in the comment section what you think about this unit, if you've played against the Seraphim from the new TacticalTortoise Codex or not, and how you would counter them in your list. Big thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video. Thanks as well to everybody who supports the channel, either over on Patreon at patreon.com/TacticalTortoise, YouTube channel members, and Twitch subscribers. All you people are amazing and I love you. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.